While the search for the U.S. airmen was underway, President Trump renewed his threat to escalate the situation in Iran ahead of a looming deadline. He reminded the country and all of us of his ultimatum to Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or reach a deal by Monday, writing on social media, quote, "Time is running out before, quote, all hell will rain down on them." Republican Senator Lindsey Graham backed the president's threats, warning Iran to choose wisely as Trump's deadline approaches or face overwhelming military force. Meanwhile, Trump continues to alienate America's allies over his war, telling them to go get your own oil if they won't help secure the Strait of Hormuz, and repeatedly threatening to pull the U.S. from the NATO alliance for not joining the war. Writing The Atlantic, Robert Kagan notes, "However America's war with Iran ends, it has both exposed and exacerbated the dangers of our new fractured multipolar reality, driving deeper wedges between the United States and former friends and allies, strengthening the hands of the expansionist great powers, Russia and China, accelerating global political and economic chaos, and leaving the United States weaker and more isolated than at any time since the 1930s. Joining us now is the man that wrote that himself, Robert Kagan, contributing writer for The Atlantic and senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. He's the author of Rebellion, How Anti-Liberalism is Tearing America Apart Again. Robert, I want to start right there with this threat to the allies. The New York Times writes that a senior European official said he thought most Europeans did not believe that Article 5, the NATO commitment to collective defense, still had teeth. The United States now seems part of the problem of world disorder, the official said, speaking anonymously, giving the sensitivity of the topic. Essentially, they are saying that the United States cannot be trusted, and that this is a president who started a war without asking them, did not come to them and talk to them as we would usually do, talk to our allies, get some more support, because as all presidents know, at the end of the war, when you're kind of really in it, at the end of the beginning, you need your allies to shore up the resources, to make sure that your resources aren't too stretched, to help out in ways that you can't do it yourself. But you argue, and I think it's accurate, that President Trump has ruined these relationships, and therefore that possibility seems impossible.
Yeah, we are facing a kind of isolation in the world that I don't think Americans, certainly of our people who are alive today, have had any memory of. The NATO alliance has been effectively destroyed. You know, Trump has been so critical of the alliance and made clear that he's not really committed to it. And he doesn't even have to formally pull out of NATO to destroy it, because NATO depends on American reliability to be there when there's a crisis and to come to their defense, which is part of our commitment. And it's pretty clear that that's not happening. And I think it's important to remember, because people are all focused on what the Europeans are or aren't doing in the Persian Gulf in the war that we started. But what people seem to be forgetting is that they are facing their own war, that there is a massive invasion of Ukraine in European territory, that everyone knows that if once Putin has succeeded in Ukraine, he's going to move on to other states, probably Baltic states. And the United States is signaling that we won't be there for anybody. This is one of the biggest victories for Putin that he could possibly imagine. His whole career has been spent trying to destroy NATO, and now Trump has given him that gift.
Bob, it is great to see you again. Eugene mentioned in the book, in the intro, your latest book is Rebellion, which is a fantastic book. People should read it. But you wrote one of your previous books. I believe the title was When the Jungle Grows Back. And it seems to me like the international order that the United States helped found and maintain over the last 8 decades is an aberration of history. And two questions. One, do you think that the things you warned about in that book are coming to fruition now? And then I'll ask you the second question after you answer that.
Well, yes. I mean, I think the order has been shattered. I think what we would have called the American order that's existed since 1945 has now been destroyed. And, you know, the jungle in this case is coming from the White House. You know, it is being destroyed actively and deliberately by the American president. So, yeah, I think that, unfortunately, it has become true. And we're going to see the breakdown in every corner of the world, by the way, both in the Middle East and in the Gulf, as well as in East Asia, and we've already talked about Europe.
All right, so now let's talk about the president and talk about his rhetoric and the threats that he's making in that rhetoric. We've been talking about his social media posts where he has warned Iran that, I think it was like, all hell will rain down on them by tomorrow if they don't come to the negotiating table or open the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm just wondering, these threats to infrastructure, to the power grid, to bridges, we've been asking around the table, particularly Eugene has been asking, and I think it's the right question, aren't these war crimes? And I'm just wondering, I mean, are these war crimes, or are we being hypersensitive here?
No, these are war crimes. And I would point you to a statement made by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, back in 2022. This is an official Pentagon statement referring to what Putin was doing in Ukraine when he was going after the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. The Pentagon labeled that specifically a war crime. There's no question that when you go after civilian facilities which keep civilians alive. We're talking about hospitals. We're talking about food supply. We're talking about water supply. When Trump talks about sending Iran back into the Stone Age, he's talking about bringing immense humanitarian suffering to the people of Iran, and that is a war crime.
And Robert, before we are out of time, you also write a lot about how this entanglement, this war, is just as damaging to the U.S.'s partners in Asia and the Western Pacific. You noted in The Atlantic last week that Japan gets 95% of their oil from the Middle East, and 70% of that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So let's say Trump's threat to, have all hell rain down on them doesn't actually materialize. The strait stays closed. How much more damage does that do to our partnerships with that area of the world?
Well, there's the other great power that's being strengthened in all of this is China, and that's of great concern, obviously, to our East Asian allies. So not only are our Asian allies paying a huge price in the price of gas, they're starting to ration gas in these countries. There's a possibility of really disturbing stability in some of these countries as a result of this oil crisis. But more important, I mean, not more importantly, but just as importantly, the United States is making it very clear that as it gets bogged down in this quagmire in the Middle East, it's pulling resources, defense resources from the Western Pacific and East Asia, which are designed to protect Japan and Taiwan and other countries in the region. And so it's clear that this is a big shift. And any arrangement that is reached after the United States has walked away, as President Trump has said he plans to do, even if the strait is closed, any arrangement to reopen the strait is, first of all, going to give enormous influence and leverage to Iran and also to one of Iran's biggest protectors, which is China. I noticed the German foreign minister, thinking about how to deal with the strait, called up the Chinese to ask them if they could be helpful. And I think we're going to see that increasingly. This is the cost of the war for the United States.
Robert Kagan, wonderful to see you again. Thank you very much for coming to The Weekend.